Hey guys, welcome back. We're still reading Black Marxism, Part 3, Black Radicalism and Marxist Theory, Chapter 9, A Historiography of the Black Radical Tradition. Excuse me. Slavery and Capitalism. Woohoo! I hope all is well. Okay, let's get started. In the beginning of Black Reconstruction, Du Bois identified the fundamental contradiction in American history. The contradiction that would subvert America's founding ideology, distort its institutions, traumatize its social relations and class formations, and in the 20th century, confuse its rebels and revolutionists. From the day of its birth, the anomaly of slavery plagued a nation which asserted the equality of all men and sought to derive powers of government from the consent of the governed. Within sound of the voices of those who said this lived more than 500,000 black slaves, forming nearly 1/5 of the population of a new nation. It was thus the black worker, a founding stone of a new economic system in the 19th century and for the modern world, who brought civil war in America. He was its underlying cause in spite of every effort to base the strife upon union and national power. And so I took this class, the SNCC Legacy class, and they were talking about how during the Civil War, sorry, I haven't stretched today. During the Civil War, black people made the Civil War about themselves. Like, at first it was just like fighting between, not at first, but I mean, pretty much it was like an economic problem. Like the South and the North, they was fighting. Black people looked around, it was like, the girls are fighting. Let's make it about us. Pretty much, in summary. I have my notes from that class. I have to find the notes somewhere. So, when I find those notes, I can definitely share them somehow, some way. They're transcriptions of the video, of the classes. That's what I do when people talk too fast. I transcribe things. I did that for college. That really actually helped because I have ADHD. So when people talk too fast, I can't write everything because my notes are typically everything. But anyways, yeah, black people made the Civil War about themselves. Go black people, go black people. Anyways, now let us pay close attention to what Du Bois is saying. Slavery was the specific historical institution through which the black worker had been introduced into the modern world system. However, it was not as slaves that one could come to an understanding of the significance that these black men, women, and children had for American development. It was labor. He had entitled the first chapter to Black Reconstruction, The Black Worker. The terms of his analysis were quite important to Du Bois. They were a part of his beginning of the transformation of the historiography of American civilization, the naming of things. In the changing of the names of things, he sought to provide a basis for a new conceptualization of their relationship. And think about that. Slaves versus enslaved. Like for me in high school, they would be like, oh, these people were slaves and this, that, and the third. And it was like, but they are not slaves. They were enslaved. They were human trafficked. They were kidnapped. And to say that people are slaves reduces them down to non-human, in a sense. Rather than enslaved, talks about that process of enslaving someone. And it still keeps their humanity intact with the understanding that this was a force, something that was forced upon them. Excuse me. Isn't that interesting though? Like how words have so much power. Slave versus enslaved. In the first three chapters of work, Du Bois established the rules of his analysis. The institution of American slave labor could not be effectively conceptualized as a thing in and of itself. Rather, it was a particular historical development for world capitalism that expropriated the labor of African workers as primitive accumulation. American slavery was a subsystem of world capitalism. Black labor became the foundation stone not only of the Southern social structure, but of Northern manufacture and commerce, of the English factory system, of European commerce, of buying and selling on a worldwide scale. New cities were built. Sorry. New cities were built on the results of black labor, and a new labor problem involving all white labor arose both in Europe and America. And American slavery would also consist of social relations given their character by the ideology of white racial superiority. There was, in 1863, a real meaning to slavery different from that we may apply to the laborer today. It was in part psychological. The enforced personal feeling of inferiority, the calling of another master, the standing with hat in hand. It was the helplessness. It was the defenselessness of family life. It was the submergence below the arbitrary will of any sort of individual. And I have some books for that topic. Psychology. Because that's my major. Yeah, this one's like under the psychology black studies. So breaking the chains of psychological slavery by Naeem Akbar. Know Thyself, Naeem Akbar. We might read some of these books on YouTube. The Community of Self by Naeem Akbar. Akbar Papers in African Psychology. Girl, this book is so good. But, dude. The Willie Lynch Letter and the Making of a Slave. I'll read, like, the opening part of it. It's actually really... The infamous Willie Lynch Letter gives both African and Caucasian students and teachers some insight concerning the brutal and inhumane psychology behind the African slave trade. The materialistic viewpoint of Southern plantation owners that slavery was a business and the victims of chattel slavery were merely pawns in an economic game of debauchery, crossbreeding, interracial assault. You know what I mean. Starts with an R. And mental conditioning of a Negroid race they considered subhuman. Like, that's the intro. But wait, it's something. But listen to this part. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slaves versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. You must use the female versus the male, and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Girl. Anyways, the South's subservient religious leaders reverted to the curse of canon. Its pseudoscientists gathered and supplemented all available doctrines of racial inferiority. Its scattered schools and pedantic periodicals repeated these legends. A basis in reason, a philanthropy, and science was built up for Negro slavery. That one's from page 39 of Black Reconstruction. All of this was necessary for the persistence of slavery through the 17th and 18th centuries, and for the meteoric development in the early 19th century, the tissue of the nation would develop, coated by its slave past. Okay, period. The next section is labor, capitalism, and slavery. Du Bois was arguing that once slavery was addressed in comprehensive terms, in world historical terms, its true nature was revealed. Beneath its appearance as a feudal agrarianism lay the real relation of slavery to the emergence of modern capitalism. As America was a critical subsector of this developing system, the conflicts between American creed and reality, the contradictions of American society, the distortions of its social structures and political institutions, ensued from its dependence on slavery and would resound throughout the system into the 20th century. Slavery, then, was not an I don't know why my brain's not working, but I just took my ADHD medicine, so we're vibing. Slavery then was not a historical aberration. It was not a mistake in an otherwise bourgeois democratic age. It was, and its imprints continued to be systematic. That's how we get like systematic racism, systematic, you know what I mean, systematic oppression. Because it's built into the nation's fabric. Like, the nation, America as a nation, is built on slavery. Yeah. Here is the real modern labor problem. Here is the kernel of the problem of religion and democracy, of humanity. Words and futile gestures avail nothing. Out of the exploitation of the dark proletariat comes the surplus value filched from human breasts, which in cultured lands the machine and harnessed power veil and conceal. The emancipation of man is the emancipation of labor, and the emancipation of labor is the freeing of that basic majority of workers who are yellow, brown, and black. Page 16 from Black Reconstruction. In America, free labor, the vast majority of it supplied by immigrant Europeans from Ireland, England, Italy, and Germany, was also profoundly affected. The new labor that came to the United States, while it was poor, used to oppression, and accustomed to a low standard of living, was not willing, after it reached America, to regard itself as a permanent laboring class, and it is in the light of this fact that the labor movement among white Americans must be studied. The successful, well-paid American laboring class formed because of its property and ideals, a petty bourgeoisie ready always to join capital in exploiting common labor, white and black, foreign and native. Eschewing the tradition forming in the European labor movement that would mature into the 19th century's socialism of the First and Second Internationals, syndicism and anarchism, the transplanted European worker became occupied with the possibility of accumulating wealth and power, of becoming capitalists. Thus, it was that American liberalism in the 19th century, with its ideals of individualism and its antagonisms to socialism, became manifest in a particular way. Its character was molded by an economic order that severely delimited material well-being and a racial consciousness. Delimited material well-being. Oh, people can't get rich here. I was like, what? And a racial consciousness that at one and the same time removed an entire section of the working classes, the blacks, from the possibility of access to that well-being, while also supplying a fictive measure of status to non-black workers. I have the hiccups. The wisest of the leaders could not clearly envisage just how slave labor, in conjunction and competition with free labor, tended to reduce all labor towards slavery. What does your labor mean if they can get free labor from the prisons? They can get literally slavery from the prisons. And then think about like mass incarceration, the criminalization of houselessness, the criminalization of abortion care. Like we're on a global plantation. Boo! Boo! That was from a quote from page 19. Oh my goodness. I'm about to go to my grandfather's house because we're going to get some flowers for my Nana. That's why I was looking at the time. Because her birthday's on Sunday. She's turning 90 or 89. Let's look it up. Let me look it up. I love my Nana. She taught me how to write cursive and wait, what year is it? Okay. turning 90. I was right. She taught me how to write cursive. She let me write my little stories and scripts. Like, not let me, she encouraged me. That's my Nana's plant. Like, that's a grandbaby from one of my Nana's plants. So she's always with me. I love my Nana. Anyways. Oh yeah, but I'm about to leave soon, so I was like, let me look at time so I know when to stop reading. We're only at 15 minutes? Girl. Well, we'll finish this passage and that will be it for today. It was only a minority of these non-black workers that would join with liberal intellectuals and freedmen to form the abolitionist movement. Du Bois has stated as early as 1915 that the labor aristocracy that was the result of the trade unionism of a materialistic labor movement in Germany, England, and France, as well as in the United States, was a crucial support to the imperialism and colonialism of the late 19th century. In the United States, black and non-black labor became politically oppressed instead of becoming one great party. The northern non-black working class movement effectively excluded the freemen, the slaves, and the 5 million poor whites of the South. It was even more specifically exclusionist after 1850, as it concentrated on a basis of skilled industrial workers and craftsmen. But it was a more generalized antagonism that would envelop black and non-black workers. During the Civil War itself, this conflict would erupt into race wars against blacks. But then the enactment of the draft laws in 1863, and with the encouragement of pro-slavery and pro-Southern Copperheads from the North, the frustration of the non-black worker with their living and working conditions and the war were turned against blacks. In the summer of 1863, hundreds of blacks were killed by mobs of workers in New York City. The report of the Merchants Committee on the Draft Rights says that the Negroes, driven by the fear of death at the hands of the mob, who the week previous had, as you remember, brutally murdered by the hanging on trees and lampposts several of their numbers, and cruelly beaten and robbed many others, burning and sacking their houses, and driving nearly all from the streets, alleys, and docks upon which they had previously obtained an honest though humble living. These people have been forced to take refuge on Blackwell's Island, at police stations, on the outskirts of the city, in the swamps, the woods, back of Bergen, New Jersey, at Weeksville, and in the barns and outhouses of the farmers of Long Island and Mauritiana. More than once in Black Reconstruction, in his editorials in The Crisis and other works, Du Bois would return to this period in order to identify the roots of racial violence in the labor movement of the 20th century. It also provided, he believed, an explanation for the tradition of skepticism found among blacks for organized labor. Valid. Like, damn. Like, thinking about some of the things that our elders and ancestors experienced, like, not like my freaking grandparents, my mom. I'm over here like, yeah, I can't complain. I'll shut up. Because, wow. People are insane. But, anyways. What was true for the mainstream of the American labor movement was also a factor in the radical tradition in the country. Though mid-19th century socialism had been largely transferred from areas of Europe where antipathies towards blacks were inconsequential, its adherents, too, had not been capable generally of resisting the corrosive influences of slavery. This had been the case for both Marxist and non-Marxist socialists. The precedents established during this period would be of no substantial help to 20th century socialists whether their programs directly or indirectly addressed themselves to the Negro problem. Even when the Marxian ideas arrived, there was a split. The earlier representatives of the Marxian philosophy in America agreed with the older Union movement in deprecating any entanglement with the abolition controversy. After all, abolition represented capital. The whole movement was based on mawkish sentimentality and not on the demands of the workers, at least of the white workers. And so the early American Marxists simply gave up the idea of introducing black workers into the socialist commonwealth at the time. From page 24 to 25 of Black Reconstruction. Though there had been exceptions, the lack of an identity between the interests of black and non-black workers was fairly consistent in the labor movement. Wherever one looked among those who saw the movement in political-electoral terms, or those who had advocated revolutionary violence, or those who were committed to economic trade unionism, the labor movement was most often, at best, ambivalent towards black liberation and progress. The ideology of racism in combination with self-interest functioned to pit immigrant and poor white workers against black workers, black work and the slave. And after the Civil War, the same social consciousness divided the working classes, immigrant and white, from the ex-slave. More than 20 years before the appearance of Black Reconstruction, and while his experience with the Socialist Party was still fresh in his mind, Du Bois had recognized this as a contradiction in the labor movement. And during the intervening years, his anger had not dissipated. When it reappeared in Black Reconstruction, it was no longer simply a warning to a negligent labor movement, but an indictment. By then, the labor movement and capitalism were older and in deep crisis. By then, Du Bois spoke as a black radical. Indeed, the plight of the white working class throughout the world today is directly traceable to Negro slavery in America, on which modern commerce and industry was founded, and which persisted to threaten free labor until it was partially overthrown in 1863. The resulting color caste found and retained by capitalism was adopted, forwarded, and approved by white labor, and resulted in subordination of colored labor to white profits the world over. Thus, the majority of the world's laborers, by the insistence of white labor, became the basis of a system of industry which ruined democracy and showed its perfect fruit in World War and depression. And this book seeks to tell that story. Page 30 from Black Reconstruction. Okay, period. So, the next one is Slavery and Democracy. Okay. Wait, how many pages is this? 1. Oh my god, I made a note about Cop City on this. We'll pause here because I need to leave. It's already 10:30. Yeah, we'll pause here. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Wait, how long is Reconstruction again? Yeah, because it's like literally a lot of them are okay. We'll do that. Yeah. Anyways, have a good day. Happy full moon in Taurus. Yeah. Bye, y'all.